That one felt like a fever dream. Like I
It
literally told
does.
my sister, I was like watching it for the first time. I was like, where are we?
Yes, I would say the first watch through is really kind of confusing.
Hello, cozy detectives, and welcome to the Blanket Fort Files. I'm Larissa,
And I'm Joy.
and we're here to report on all things Halloween, comfy and cozy.
Yay! I feel like I always do this. I always like
I
raise
know
my
I'm
eyebrows.
we're both very like little eyebrow wigglers.
Expressive.
I know we part of me wants to see if we can find like a Halloween spooky cute ish vibe for our theme this episode just because it actually comes out on Halloween. So,
Oh, like
but
a song?
yeah, I don't know, like but like our basically like our theme, but like on an organ or something
Mm.
just to make it Halloweeny vibe.
Ooh, that's so funny. I wouldn't have thought of that. Yeah, that's very the Psych TV show would do that if they were talking
Mm.
about different things. Like there was times where they would even like sing the intro in other languages
Oh
because it worked
wow.
with what the theme was for that episode. And yeah, I like the detail aspects of that. But Larissa, hi, you're looking very
Hello.
folly. I like the pumpkins in the background. Make sure they get
Yes.
in the shot.
Yeah, I was setting up when Joy joined our little video call, and she was like, "Hi, hello, hello," and I'm like, my headphones are not in, and she's like, "Is my microphone working?" And I
Decorating
was just
mode.
re-adding little pumpkins
It's
because it's actually
cute.
Halloween in your world today. So we're excited for this episode. This episode to actually fall on the holiday, which
Oh.
Halloween isn't necessarily a cozy holiday. But
True.
I think there's ways that you can make it cozy. And we kind of talked a little bit about that last week in our close adjacent Halloween vibes episode. But we thought it would be kind of fun to start this episode off before we get into our more specific Halloween case files this week to talk about some cozy Halloween memories that we had either more recently or even growing up, just for those cozy vibes. So, Joy, I'm really excited to hear about yours because I know one thing you were going to talk about I've never experienced before. So, I'm very
Oh.
curious to hear more about it and what it is.
Yes. So I was kind of thinking about it in the way of growing up. So I have a very specific memory. Now, I didn't really ever celebrate Halloween itself, but like the fall season and kind of things that come with that, we always did. So when I was really, really young, we lived in Ohio, and my parents had, I think it was technically just like our detached huge garage, but to me, it was like a barn, and we
Mm-hmm.
had a, I don't know if it was, I don't know what it was like connected with, but I just remember having a lot of friends and family over, and we had we had the bobbing for apples that we talked about last week. I remember that. And that's where we had it was like a stick that you would attach. It was always like powdered donuts, and you try to eat the donut without it falling on the ground. And just like, I don't know if we had pumpkin carving again, maybe more pumpkin painting would be my dealio, but I have that memory from childhood. Then I have a really fun one that was more specific college based.
Okay.
But do you have any that are more like childhood based before I transition us to older?
Yeah, I so when I was like really little, we would do more store-bought costumes, and then I don't remember the exact age, but it was more just kind of to save money to do more like homemade costumes. I know, so I did ballet for years and years, so a lot
Mm.
of times I just like rewore an old dance costume
Cute.
because those are really expensive.
So expensive.
But one year, my friend and I decided we were going to be like 1950s car hops from like a drive-through diner,
Cute.
and we like hot glued our candy bucket to a little metal tray. So we would trick or treat with our little serving tray.
Oh, you were in it.
Yeah, and we made French fries out of like yellow sponges. Like we cut them up and put like red paint on it for the ketchup. And then
Cute.
we had these little foam visors that we use like puff paint to decorate them. But the real fun thing of that, but also kind of stressful, we went rollerblading to trick or treat around the neighborhood.
Oh my gosh. Were you in the inline skates or were you in
Hmm.
those like whoa, you
Yeah.
were like a pro then? Cuz I remember you first would start with those 4 chunker skates and then you could like upgrade to
Yeah,
inline. That was the
I
cool kids.
always struggled with the 4. Like, I
Mm.
remember that was the first ones I tried, like, on a field trip or something or a party at the roller rink, and I just don't know why, but I couldn't get the hang of those, so I immediately went to the inlines and just
Okay.
preferred those, which I know is kind of odd because you're definitely less balanced than the 4 to stabilize you, but, yeah, we went, rollerblading on Halloween, which
Whoa.
looking back now, I'm just because it's not the most well lit, like, it's usually after dark,
Yeah.
and there's bumps in the sidewalk, and I don't know, but we had a lot of fun.
And you made it through no scrapes
Yeah,
or
no one
scars?
fell, luckily. Yeah.
Wow, nice, nice. That's awesome. Do you have a memory from, like, after that time period? Because mine's around the college age.
Yeah, not necessarily, so you can definitely get in tears. I do have one, and this was probably even littler than the car hop because I think
Aw,
the car
cute.
hop we were probably like 11 or 12, but we used to go to our city's zoo because they would do like a boo at the zoo where
Mm,
you could dress up in
fun.
costume and do all kinds of like zoo related activities. And my biggest memory with that, and this probably wasn't necessarily cozy, but I went as a witch that year with like green face paint, and all of the photos are just like splotchy because I would itch and rub my face. So I just
Aw.
have these like green splotches on my face.
Cute. Aw,
Yeah.
yeah, a little alphabet-esque, but
Yeah.
aw, that's so cute. Yeah, we have a boo at the zoo in our town. I haven't been. I have wait, have I been to that one? No, I haven't. I've been to one that's like our botanic garden does something for Halloween, but also does something for Christmas, which I
Ooh.
really like because I'm like, okay, no one goes to botanic gardens in Christmas when there's no flowers. So I
Yeah.
feel like they do a really good job with lighting it up. So I've been to that one, but I have not been to the Halloween one. But we used to have Boo at the zoo in my hometown zoo as well.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, just real quick, you
yeah,
reminded me of kind of a more current memory, and I'm not following our little timeline here, but you
no, you're
mentioned
fine.
the botanical gardens, and
Yeah.
ours does um, both Halloween and Christmas. Well, it's more fall, so they do a bunch of pumpkins, and they make like a house out of pumpkins. That's really
Ooh.
cool. I actually went last year and they kind of change out the theme, I believe, every year. And the theme last year was actually my case file this week. So I will
Aw.
talk about that. I just like remembered, oh yeah, I went last year. And we also do a Christmas one. They do like a 12 days of Christmas, like the song.
Oh,
And
that's
so they
cute.
have different stations around for each of the days and the from the song.
That's cool. I have a hot take on that. I've heard that in the 12 days is that the, like, 7 lords of
Hmm.
leaping? Blah, blah.
Yeah.
I've heard all of those are birds. They're all birds.
I
It's
saw
all
that
lies.
recently too,
Yeah.
where yeah, because the first like I don't know 4 are like we think of as birds, but
Yeah.
then you get into the Maids of Milking and the Lords of Leaping, and those are also birds. So
Yeah. Crazy. I'm like, "What? I'm gonna get, like, 100 birds for Christmas? I don't want that."
I think I've talked about this before on here. I'm terrified of birds, so that sounds like the worst Christmas ever to me.
Right? Honestly, honestly. My older memory is so I lived in Orlando for quite a while, and they have the Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween party at Disney World, and a couple friends and I went, and it was just really fun because it really isn't that like the point of it is like it's the not scary part. There's a Universal Studios that has the Halloween Horror Nights, which has like the
No, thank
houses to
you.
walk through. Yeah, I've never done any of that. I also don't get how just this is like a random tangent, but in that they have people that are paid that are walking around the park trying to like jump out and scare you, and they'll like have knee pads and like glide on the ground and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't get how they don't get punched. Is there not one person that has that reaction? I've seen those videos of trick-or-treaters and
Yeah.
they're like haha, and then like someone like punch it. I'm like, how do you not get punched? I feel like you get
Maybe
kicked out of the park, but I'm like, that's not my fault if I have that reflex.
right. I guess maybe if you're going to that, like you are
You
expecting to be
know,
scared.
yeah.
But yeah, I've never and don't have any plans to ever do like a
Oh,
haunted
it's weird.
house. Like I said in the last episode, I'm a big scary baby. I could not do that.
Yeah, so Mickey's Not So Scary is kind of the opposite of that, where it's cute because you can kind of trick or treat around the park.
Oh, cute.
So you can dress up. So that's a very common thing. I was a scarecrow.
Cute.
And so you kind of walk around, you trick or treat. There's a different fireworks, which is really cool. There's different parades. You can meet the Disney villains that's like one of the few times you can meet them is during that. Now it is a separate ticket from what I remember, but it was fun. It was a unique thing. You can only go into the park at like 6 or 7 p.m. So that is a little bit different. So it's definitely nighttime focused,
Mm-hmm.
but the fireworks being different, the parades being different, the characters being different, trick or treating is kind of fun. And then the one that I went to, I have this memory of, I don't know why, but like, I don't know why everybody just doesn't sit and watch the fireworks, because if we all just sat, we could all be sitting and watch the fireworks, you
That's how
know?
I feel sometimes. I don't really go to concerts anymore just because they're too overstimulating for me. But like sometimes with concerts, I'm like, if we all just sat, we could all see.
Yeah. Yeah. And for some reason, I don't know if everyone was just off of their sugar high or what it was, but we were like all sitting, eating our candies, watching the fireworks.
That's
And I just have
nice.
that memory of like sitting there really close to the castle. I don't know how we got that close, to be honest, but it was a fun memory. I've done it a few times, but the time that I was dressed as a scarecrow is the memory that I have from that time period for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, I've never done any of actually I've only been to Disney World twice.
Mm.
And so I've never done any of the themes or the holidays. I've never been as an
Aw.
adult. The two times we went, one time, I think I was like seventh or eighth grade, and my dad travels a lot for work. And so he was working in Orlando. So we actually got to he got a hotel room for all of us. So we got to
That's
at
cool.
least get the hotel paid for. And then the first time we went, I think I was probably like third or fourth grade, and I got a stomach bug like the day of our flight, so I was
Ah.
just like sick that whole day, and there was a bunch of flight delays, so like we didn't get to our hotel until like 3 in the morning.
Oh, no.
So it was like a rough day, and then just kind of starting Disney of just kind of being that like I wasn't
Bubbly.
sick anymore, but you're still kind of like dazed and out of it. So
Yeah, yeah. That they do a Christmas one as well, and the Christmas one's really cute because they have it snow, quote
oh,
unquote.
cute.
And obviously in Florida or in California, it's not known for snowing. So
Right.
it's cute that there's like all the little foam that happens, and you can get it used to see all this is like really dated information. So I hope this is still true, but you can get hot chocolates for free and you get a little cookie for free, and you kind of watch it snow on Main Street. And then there's different characters and different outfits and things like that during that time
That's
too.
fun.
So
Yeah,
I like
I've
the themed
I've
events,
thought
obviously.
about I thought about going again as an adult just because it does seem kind of fun, but I don't know. Again, I just get overwhelmed with crowds, and then it's so expensive
Ooh.
now
Yeah.
too. So
Yeah.
I
The
think
one
I'll
thing
just go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say the one thing I will say about that is from what I remember, unless they've upped the amount of tickets, again, dated information, so take this as a grain of salt. But the one thing I also really liked about these events is they would limit the tickets per night.
Mm,
So you would be more likely to be able to get on rides or to see these different things, because there was like, I don't want to say a half, but it felt like half the people in the park versus like a regular day,
where it's
because they
full.
do kind of start from the back and move forward. And if you don't have the like wristband that says that you're there for the event, you can't stay that night. Now, if you are planning on going, all these Disney tips, if you are planning on going and it happens to be around either like the fall event or the Christmas event, just double check, because it'll say on the website if that night is a park I guess like event night, because then you do have to leave at 6, which would be a bummer if you're like planning your
Planning to
trip
stay
around that.
longer. Yeah,
Yeah,
that makes
so it's just
sense.
Magic Kingdom typically, so go to somewhere else that day. But
Yeah. Well,
yes.
my last little cozy memory is more
Yeah, please.
recent. So
Oh.
every year since I've had my dog, little Rosie, she and
Yeah.
I do a themed costume
It's
together
so
every
cute.
year. Um, so sometimes I make her go as like the other person. So we went as Luke and Lorelai one year, and then we did Moira and Alexis from Schitt's Creek. But then sometimes I make her like my prop. So one year I went, this is like when Stranger Things was like really big. So I
Mm.
went as 11 and she was a box of Eggos.
Cute. And she's so tiny too. It's funny
Yeah.
because she's so tiny, so she's perfect if she's like Luke, but she's also perfect as like a box of Eggos.
Right.
It just
Yeah.
works.
The first year was also kind of when Game of Thrones was still on. And so I was
Mm.
Khaleesi and she was my little dragon.
You'll have to share all those photos because I
Yeah.
feel like, I don't know, Rosie's just awesome and makes me laugh.
Yeah.
And
She's a little bean.
yeah, she's so cute. Well, should we get into our cozy case files for this week having to
Yes.
do, I guess this week's, I'm trying to think of like what the phrasing of the theme is. I guess we like picked Halloween vibes item.
Yeah,
I
I
don't know
would
how would you
say
say it.
yeah, I would say they're both cozy Halloween. Yours is a little more skeptical on the cozies at times, but we'll
Yeah,
get into that.
yeah. Oh, so
But
cute.
yours definitely has like cozy elements. Um, it's interesting too because both of ours are technically not movies, but they both kind of
Yeah.
feel as movies. But yeah, just cozy Halloween media. I'm up first this week, and I am talking about It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown.
Yay,
Clickety
so
clack.
cute.
I like always want to like add that in when I introduce the case file now. But
I just edited the one where it was the first time you said that, and I was like, "Oh, that's so funny."
oh
Because
yeah,
I like cut right after we say it, and I move us a little bit, and then I came back to us, and you were like, "Clickety clack."
perfect.
So cute.
And this is probably one that a lot of people know because it's one of the most well-known Halloween little mini movies, but it actually hasn't aired in quite some time, and I'll get into the why of that. So maybe you haven't seen it, or maybe you haven't. It's just been a while. But this is a 1966 American animated Halloween television special. So
Mm.
it wasn't a movie, and it's like around 30-ish minutes, maybe a little less without commercials. So it's pretty short, and it is based on the comic strip The Peanuts by
Mhm.
Charles M. Schultz. So I'm assuming most people listening are pretty familiar with The Peanuts. You got Charlie Brown, Snoopy, the whole crew. Um, this was actually the third Peanuts like television special, and specifically the second holiday themed one. And it was written by Schultz, but also along with the director and animator Bill Melendez and the producer Lee Mendelson. For anyone who hasn't seen it or somehow not familiar, I'll do a quick premise. But so the group, Charlie Brown and all of his friends, they're going to a Halloween party, and Charlie's friend Linus is going to miss it because he wants to wait for the mysterious great pumpkin
So
in a
cute.
pumpkin patch. It's basically his version of Santa Claus. He still believes in it, and everyone is like, what are you talking about? But he manages to at least convince Sally, who is Charlie's sister, because Sally has a big crush on Linus. So they are waiting like all night in the pumpkin patch for the great pumpkin. Meanwhile, Snoopy has one of his famous World War One pilot adventures with the Red Baron, which is funny because both that and the scene where Lucy pulls the football away
Yeah,
from
yeah.
Charlie, those were both the first time in an animated series or show or whatever that those appear. They had only been in the comic strips before this one.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's cute.
So Snoopy crashes at the party and goes to check it out. And the vibes just kind of gets too sad for him. He's like, I'm out of here. So then he goes to the pumpkin patch, and Linus mistakes Snoopy for the great pumpkin. So he's all excited and ends up like
Bound.
fainting. And then Sally gets all mad and she's like, you embarrassed me.
Aw.
So then she leaves and Linus like falls asleep. So his sister Lucy comes, wakes him up, takes him home, and then the next morning he's like, next year the great pumpkin will come. I believe it. So it's just kind of about Linus having this faith and this belief that the great pumpkin exists and is going to come visit him in the pumpkin patch.
Cute. I have that one on DVD. I didn't know that it hadn't been on TV in a while.
Yes. So a little bit of backstory. It basically from 1966, I don't think it aired every year at first, but it eventually got to a point where it would air
Yeah.
near Halloween every single year up until 2020,
Mm.
when Apple purchased this exclusive streaming rights to have
Boo.
it. So that first year in 2020, like everyone was upset that they
Yeah.
couldn't watch it, which is
Ah, how
understandable. It
rude,
is
especially in 2020. Give me freaking Charlie Brown.
right. We're already miserable enough as it
You
is.
know?
You take away our Halloween movie.
How rude.
Um, but and this is a decades long tradition. So like generations have
Yeah.
found and loved it. So then 2021, Apple was like, we'll be nice. And for these 3 days, you can stream it for free. But then
Rude.
after that, they never have again. But while I was researching, I
Mm.
did find most of it kind of in segmented clips on YouTube, which probably is not super legal to have it on there, but
Yeah,
that's
great.
what we got to do to be able to watch it because some people are
Yeah.
too greedy. um,
Aw.
but a little bit of just like fun things that I learned about are just little factoids, I guess.
Yeah.
So another scene, but so before the party, everyone except Linus goes trick or treating.
Mm. Mhm.
And which is kind of funny that I'm wearing this.
Yeah.
Most of them are dressed up like little ghosts with the eyes cut out, but Charlie has a hard time and he just has holes all over his little
Oh, I
ghost
remember
sheets.
that.
And he
Cute.
ends up getting rocks at every stop. They always say, like, I got a popcorn ball, I got a nickel, I got a rock. And that was actually because when the animators were like coming up with the premise, I didn't write down which one was which, but one of them was like, oh, well, what if Charlie got a rock? Like, that would be kind of funny. And then another one said, oh, well, that would be too mean if he got a rock. So then the first one was like, fine, then he's going to get 3 rocks. So he does. There's 3 stops and he gets a rock 3 times. And so
Aw.
after this aired, a bunch of kids mailed in candy to the studio for Charlie. And that happened for like a
Aw.
few years when they would re air it.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah, I
That's like
love
the
that.
vibes of, like Letters to Juliet, where like people will send letters
Mm-hmm.
to the. Oh, that's so cute.
Yeah,
It's
I
like a
thought that was
reverse
really
trick or
sweet.
treating. Oh,
And I mentioned the thing about the Snoopy and the World War I pilot. So that those are like elements of the comic strip that just kind of like reappeared throughout. And I couldn't really find necessarily like why they decided to make him have this little like pilot
yeah.
backstory, but it's just something we like associate Snoopy with now. But yeah, this is like the first time that appeared outside of the comic strip, which I thought was kind of interesting. And speaking of
Whoa.
the comic, it was first printed in 1950. So this was like 16 years before the
Wow.
animated special even came out. And the first time the Great Pumpkin was introduced in the comic strip was 1959. So almost a whole decade before they even introduced the Great Pumpkin. And so that basically came to be because Linus confused the traditions of Halloween and Christmas in that strip. So he was just like legitimately thinking that the Great Pumpkin was Santa because he got his holidays mixed up.
Aw, cute.
And then they had kind of a similar story with the Great Pumpkin again the following year. And then essentially, basically, every October, Schultz would have some sort of Great Pumpkin storyline in the comic strips. And then the budget for production for this was only $76,000, which I calculated on like an inflation website, which is about $750,000 today, which I feel like for a production budget is still very, very low.
Yeah.
Which
The
again,
Marvel movies are like hundreds of millions,
mhm,
like
yeah. And
comparatively.
granted, this is, a short
Yeah.
the animation, but still, I just was like blown away because it was a comic strip for a long time before we even got to putting it on a TV show. So I thought that was just interesting that it was a really small budget.
Yeah,
Um,
honestly.
and then a little bit about the animation and the animators. So the team was led, it was actually a group of artists. So Melendez kind of gets the credit as like the lead animator, but it was like a full team. And some of the other artists were Bill Littlejohn and Dean Spile. I think that's how you say that. But there was a bit of his artwork. So he painted the backgrounds of kind of this like French countryside vibe that we see when Snoopy has the flying ace sequence, that whole scene, which actually I learned takes up a quarter of the entire series, or this entire like
Yeah.
program. It's fourth of it is to this scene of him flying around in his little doghouse.
Aw, that's so
Um,
cute.
but he was drawing purely from memory about areas in Europe that he had visited, and was just like, yes, this is what I'm going to channel, which kind of reminded me a little bit of when we did the Studio Ghibli episode and how they were also
Yeah.
inspired by European country architecture. So I
That's so
just thought that was
interesting.
interesting. And then the backgrounds in that particular sequence used what they call a linear perspective rather than just the simple flat design. So I think when you're viewing it, especially for animation at the time, like obviously it's not as advanced as what we see today with computers. And I know we talked about that last week, but at the time, like that was a really like advanced technique and just kind of brought that scene a little bit more to life.
Ooh, that's so interesting. It's interesting because I'm trying not to make like all of the comparisons between yours and mine, but mine is one that kind of, instead of hearkening like being forward for its time period, was kind of like in a good way, but like behind for its time period. And I bet
Yeah.
it's cartoons like this that make it feel that nostalgia for us, because like Charlie Brown has such a nostalgia for people that are watching it. I'm so surprised that we hadn't seen either Snoopy do that, or the football that you said was the first time in that. That's so interesting. I thought like those are certain scenes that I think of when I think
Right.
of
You
Charlie
just
Brown.
have that association. And like they
Yeah.
did appear in the comic strip, but like they weren't in any of the animated stuff yet.
Whoa.
And then um, the soundtrack is also pretty well
Mm.
known for
Yeah.
this, and it's by the Vince Guaraldi Sextet. And I'm very excited because I should have it by the time this episode airs. But I finally
What?
ordered the vinyl of it. Have you seen the like
I
orange
have it.
pumpkin?
The
Oh, you
pumpkin.
do?
I should have brought it up here. I don't know why I didn't.
Well, we'll insert a photo or video of it, but I just ordered it. Oh, I'm shaking a little bit.
No, you're fine.
I just ordered it, so I'm really
Cute.
excited. Because I feel like it's one of those just like super cozy vibes for this time of year.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and then my last little point was that it actually kind of set the stage and defined and created this new genre of Halloween specials,
Mm.
because it was actually the first one to ever be broadcast on television. And then other shows and movies and stuff started doing more Halloween specials, but prior to the mid 60s with Charlie Brown, we hadn't really seen that before.
Oh, that's so interesting. So Halloween specials overall, or more for cartoon based
Just
ones?
overall. Yeah.
Wow. Wow, that's so interesting. Because I feel like even thinking of like we talked last week about kind of like movies, but not movies for Halloween, but like there are like Hallmark's whole shtick is 25 Days of Christmas, and so
Right.
I feel like there's things like that where you just think feels so normal. So for Charlie Brown being so like forward
Groundbreaking.
thinking and groundbreaking
Mhm.
in that area, yeah, that is so fun.
And I think it's interesting too because obviously, like Christmas had specials before then because that's probably the biggest holiday. And then, but outside of Halloween and Christmas, I don't feel like there are those traditional things. Like maybe there'll be, like, even with Charlie Brown, there was like an Easter special that they did,
Yeah.
maybe a Thanksgiving one from time to time. But I think, in terms of, like you said, the like 31 Days of Halloween on ABC Family and the
Yeah.
25 Days of Christmas, like those are like events.
Yeah.
And, even on like Nickelodeon or Disney Channel, like there was always a Halloween episode at least once in the show. But you don't see that very often with other holidays. I'm just kind of curious why that is.
Yeah, I think that also kind of lends itself to this time of year through the end of the year feeling so nostalgic, because we have those core memories of like those moments in time from our childhood that we can like pull back out even now.
Hmm.
And I feel like there's certain things of Easter and things like that that you could still pull out, but I wonder if that's also why this time period feels so nostalgic, because we can find those memories.
That's a good way of thinking of that for sure. Um, yeah, and I think too, just because there are so many elements with these holidays, and I think regardless of like what, with Christmas, there's, there could be the religious side or like the non-religious, the more commercial side of Christmas. So there's almost a little bit for everyone, and kind of the same thing with Halloween. Like if you are into more spooky, scary stuff, but if you're into just like cute little ghosts and the little fall leaves, like there's a little bit of things for everyone, but there's just so many different activities and components that go with it versus
Yeah.
like I guess with Easter, like that one obviously is a lot more
Yeah,
on the
that's like the next
religious
one.
side.
Yeah.
And you've got like the egg hunt and the bunny, but that's about it. And I guess Valentine's, once you're not a kid, you don't really do anything too much for that unless you like have a partner. And even then,
Even
a lot
then,
of people
yeah.
don't.
Yeah. Even then I'm like, you better give me a present on a different day. You know what I mean? Like, don't be like, here's my one present. Like, that's
Right.
lame. I always thought that was lame.
Yeah.
But
I'm
that's very
so
cool.
excited for yours because I just watched it for the very first time like a week or two ago because I knew you had said you watched it every year. So I'm so excited to learn more of the backstory behind it.
Yes, I feel more confident in talking about it now than I was previously because there are so many different theories. It's kind of like if you've watched Lost, where eventually it just kind of becomes its own thing, and like it's hard not to like, I don't want to spoil Lost. I am definitely going to end up having to spoil this in order to give some of the detailed backgrounds of it. But my case file this week is Over the Garden Wall, which is a whole thing. But I think I have solidified my theories on the show. And I think in doing the research on it, I feel like the creator of it has given specific thoughts as well. So I feel like those added together we'll get into. But if you haven't seen it, it came out in 2014. So this is the 10th year.
Wow. Which that
Crazy.
when you mentioned that it was using like older style of animations, that
Yeah.
kind of clicked because we were looking stuff up on IMDb when we watched it, as you do, and I
It's a
didn't
whole thing.
realize that it was that recent because it feels like it was from like an older time, and so I
Yep.
was like, "That's interesting," but if it's intentional, I'm very curious as kind of like the why behind that.
Yeah, I have some background on the creator himself and also not specifically the animation style, but I know that the animation style it's kind of more of that 2D feel of it. So it is came out in 2014, and what they did is they released 2 episodes per evening for a week. So it's a 10 episode miniseries. It is on Cartoon Network, but I would not say it's made for kids. I would definitely say it's made for adults. It is their first miniseries ever on
Oh,
Cartoon
wow.
Network, which is cool. It is the creator is Patrick McHale, and he is also before this he was a former writer and creative director on Adventure Time. So if the animation kind of looks familiar with that 2D feel, that's probably one of the reasons why. Also, his parents, when he was a kid, for a time ran an antique business.
Oh,
So
cool.
kind of that like love of antiques, the love of the old. There's a lot of symbolism in different aspects that you wouldn't think
Mhm.
when you first walk through this show. But the show itself is based around 2 brothers. We find out this is where the spoilers just kind of have to start in order to give background,
Yeah.
but we find out later on episode 9 out of 10 that it's set on Halloween night, which makes more sense why the boys are dressed the way that they are. But in episode 1 we just kind of like hop into it.
Yeah.
So they go over the garden wall, quote unquote. I know, shocker. And they end up in this unknown lost area, and they're kind of navigating their way back. Now there's a lot of theories and vibes to jump into, but the way that I've kind of started to come to think of it, it's kind of blurring the line between real and unreal, kind of like the Wonderland, the Neverland, the Oz kind of feel of,
Mhm.
is this really happening? Is this not really happening?
Yeah.
The best way that I've heard it described, so there's a the 2 brothers are Wirt and Greg, and Wirt is the older brother, Greg is the younger brother, and Greg's the one that has the teapot on his head. But he's dressed up for Halloween, and I somehow like didn't realize this, but he's dressed as an elephant.
Oh,
So
that's
cute.
so cute. I've been trying to convince my sister to go as him since we watched. I was like, please just walk around with a tea kettle on your head.
I know, right?
That's
It's
so
so
cute.
he's very lighthearted. He's very fantastical in his thoughts and phrases,
Yeah,
and he has this little walk.
he seemed to me just to represent kind of like we've talked about with the Studio Ghibli of just that like
Yeah.
innocence and whimsical and imagination in comparison to his like older brother who just seemed a lot more serious.
Yeah, yeah. He's so the older brother is kind of potentially more in that teen era feel of things. In episode 9, we realize it's Halloween. That's why they're dressed that way. He's also pretty anxious because he's going to this party. He doesn't want his crush Sarah to know. He also has it's kind of that teen feeling of a lot of times there's like that superiority inferiority feel when you're a teen of like you
Mhm.
feel like somebody is so much cooler than you, so he's really intimidated by this Thunderberg other guy that he thinks that his the girl that he thinks she likes the other guy, and then we like see him and he's pretty kind of like quote unquote goofy looking, which Patrick McHale, the creator of it, has said actually he looked more like Pat Thunderberg than he did of Wirt. So it's really cute kind of seeing that through those perspectives. And because Wirt has more of that doom and gloom, a little more anxiety feel to him,
Mhm.
it kind of makes more sense when we think about the one episode towards the end that's just like so loopy and they're like in the clouds and it's really confusing.
Yeah.
And that's potentially more like Greg's thoughts of things. He's a little kid,
Yeah,
he's
that
really
makes sense.
fantastical, he's really kind of all over the place.
That one felt like a fever dream. Like, I
It
literally told
does.
my sister, I was like, "This feels like whoever made this was on drugs or something or on
It's
cough
really
medicine,"
loopy.
but yeah, but I do like that thought of just, like, his imagination of things and that childlike
Yeah.
wonder, but yeah, just watching it for the first time, I was like, "Where are we?"
Yes, I would say the first watch through is really kind of confusing. They
Yeah.
mix lighter episodes with like dark episodes. I did
Mhm.
give Larissa a warning. I mean, I was like, "There's one episode I don't watch. I just skip it because it's really dark." I think it's episode was it
It
6?
was
That's the one I was
7, and
7. Okay.
so just like a behind the scenes of this
Yeah.
because you had thought it was 6, so we went into 6 like, "Okay, here we go. This is the one Joy said was kind of
Oh no.
creepy." And also, like, I didn't realize going into them, like, they're 12-minute episodes,
Yeah,
and
they're
I
really
think
small.
they're really short, so we, like, binged through it just in a couple of days. And so we get to, and Joyce just said it was this creepy lady. So we're like, okay, so we get to one like older lady, and we're like, okay, like she could maybe be a little creepy, but we didn't think it was that bad. But we're like, maybe this just like freaks Joy out. Like, okay, so then we get into episode 7, and for anyone who's seen it, we get to the like really giant lady who I thought was the first little witchy lady, just like under some sort of spell, and Jacqueline had to explain that they were different to me because I get
It's
really lost
confusing.
watching stuff for the first couple of times, and this one especially.
Oh
So I was
yeah.
like, okay, yeah, I could see why she might skip this. This is kind of creepy. She just like, kind of like talks weird and she looks kind of weird. And then we got to the actual like creepy demon lady, and I was like, yep,
Yep.
that would be a skip for me too. This is
Yep.
really creepy.
Yep. Yeah, they were very specific on adding episodes in. Like the episode, I think it's 2. I'm gonna get these numbers clearly confused, but there's an episode where they find a one schoolhouse, and
Mhm.
there's a lady, and then there's these is it anthropomorphized, like basically animals, but they're like little people personalities.
Yeah.
And that's kind of more based upon like Beatrix Potter, who like wrote stories about animals who had personalities and feelings, and then like that mixed with like really scary, creepy lady that I skip and
Yeah. The bird, her that was Beatrice, was that her
Beatrice.
name? Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I loved her, and when there's that, like, possibility where she betrayed them, I was like, "No, she didn't." That I love that bird. This is remember I said I didn't like birds. I was like, "I love this bird." And I was like, "Nope, I don't believe this. I am rooting for you." And then it was revealed that she was still good, and I was like, "My girl."
Yeah. And so it's so interesting because it starts to kind of all blend together. And then after you watch it a few times, I feel like is when you really start to understand the story of it, because of the
Mhm.
very opening clip. And again, more spoilers, but we're already here in spoilers. But in the very opening clip, they show all these different kind of small moments that you don't really see in the rest of the series. And it's like, okay, well, what are these moments? And one of those moments is a girl sitting with her dog. And then
Mm.
you realize later on, oh, that's actually so Beatrice is a bird that you meet in this, but she's cursed. She's actually a person. And that dog is her dog, which is also the same dog
Oh.
as the episode one. That's like the really creepy dog.
Yeah.
Because when that dog becomes himself again, it's that dog. The reason that the guy with the lantern has that house that he's like, oh, I found this, it was abandoned. It's because Beatrice is a bird now, but that's her home because you
Mhm.
see that same home later on. So it's a lot of things like that that like slowly start to like blend
Yeah.
together. And it's definitely a rearranged timeline. Now they did think about putting the episode 9 where you find out it's Halloween at the beginning, but they felt like that didn't give enough intrigue to the story because you're just kind of like giving everything away at the beginning.
Yeah, I did kind of like that slow reveal,
Me
and
too.
then I do like when things are that interconnected and you do have to watch it a couple of times to
Yeah.
fully piece it all together. I just think that's very, like, brilliant, intelligent storytelling, so I definitely do wanna go back through it again, probably not this year, but,
Yeah. I would
I
say it's a once a year watch for
yeah.
sure. Yeah, and it's one of those cartoons where they were I think it was like they were offered to have it be an actual TV show and they were like, "No, this actually works better as a mini series." And so
Which
that's why it's only that amount.
I appreciate when people do that, or, like,
Yeah.
when even just with TV shows when they end it when it needs to end, like, the one I talk about a lot is Schitt's Creek, like, they could have
Mhm.
gone on longer, but I
Oh,
think w
yeah.
ending it where they did was so smart, and I appreciate when creators know, "This is where I wanna end this story," so I do appreciate they
Yes.
made that call.
Absolutely, and there's a few familiar voices, I would say faces, but it's not faces, in this. So if you, have watched it, the older brother, Wirt, is actually Elijah Woods from, where we pretty much know him is Lord of the Rings, and he has a quote about the show, which I think is a really good example of the show, the feel of it. And he said, if the show were a record, it would be on a phonograph. So I feel like
Oh, yeah.
that's kind of the vibe of it. And he said in different interviews that that's one of the reasons he really liked the art style of it. And that's one of the things that drew him to the project. Also, Christopher Lloyd, who is Back to the Future, is the old man in this. He's the woodsman.
Mhm.
The younger brother, Gregory, is I don't know if he's done other things, but his name is Colin Dean. Beatrice is Melanie Linsky, I think is how you say her name. I like totally remember her face, but I'm trying to think of what I've seen her in. Sorry, Melanie. She's in Young Sheldon is the first one that I've seen
Mm.
that she's she's only in 2 episodes, so never mind. Sorry, Melanie. Um, but it's kind of that blur between what is real and what is not. They, for a while, it's basically these two boys that are lost and they're trying to get back, as I said before, but they're kind of meeting all these different fantastical characters. And people have a lot of different theories on what this unknown area is. I think it does make the most sense to me personally. Now, you could fight me in the comments, but I won't be fighting. Um, that it's the different perspective of the boys of like depending on their ages, depending on like the anxiety that they're feeling in certain areas, because I think thinking of it as Wirt's feelings towards things makes a lot of sense, that it's kind of more like doom and gloom.
Yeah.
And then you also have like that opposed to Greg and the very lighthearted, very quirky type of thoughts of it. Also, if you're thinking of it as more kind of like a dream state, it makes more sense because they'll just like
Mhm.
appear on a boat. And I feel like
Yeah.
that's kind of what you do in dreams. You kind of just like pop around to all these different areas.
Right.
One thing I thought was cute because is similar to your case file in that you at one point were able to purchase the cassette that is shown in it. So it's a
Oh, the mixtape?
yeah, the For Sarah, and it's
Cute.
really cute because Wirt's character is very maybe ethereal is not the word, but like very inward thoughts. He really likes poetry. He really likes
Mhm.
all these different things. And on the cassette is like Elijah Woods like quoting poetry. And I just think that's so
I
cute.
love that.
Makes perfect sense. You used to be able to buy it. I've heard that it's on YouTube now,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
I thought that was fun because you can buy the record for yours, which is really nice.
Love it.
A few more behind the scenes is there was a short before this called
Mm.
Tomb of the Unknown. And so that was the same characters, and that was created by Cartoon Network's Shorts Development Program. So that was kind of like, I guess, kind of like thinking of it as like the pitch for the show.
Mhm.
After this, I believe there's also different cartoons that you can read as well, like the more graphic novel type things that you can read.
Hmm.
The Patrick McHale has said that Greg, the younger brother, is based upon his son, which I thought was really cute. Just like the
Cute.
really whimsy of that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more like deep dive aspects of things. And in looking at it, like, okay, well, that connects to there. Okay, that makes more sense. Or like this, like Potter's Field is based upon this other word, which equals that. But I think in thinking about it kind of a little bit more at that 30,000 feet, it's two boys walking through trying to figure out things like, will they grow? Will they not grow as people? It's definitely, I would say if there's a main character, it's the older brother,
Hmm.
but I think it's very whimsical. I think it's a lot based upon those older, like some of it like looks kind of creepy when you think of it, because like the Potter's Field specifically is skeletons that have uh pumpkins over them.
Yeah, like that was where you start feeling like, okay, this is
Well,
it's not
yeah.
necessarily creepy, it's a little more unsettling would be kind of how I would
Yeah.
describe it, 'cause, like, and there yeah, there's moments where you're like, but then there's also
Yeah.
just, like, fun, like, we're walking through the forest, kinda cute
Yeah.
vibes.
Yeah, it's set in New
Um,
England too, so obviously, like, there's that feeling of
Classic.
it where very classic Americana feels. There's the jazz feel of it too. So it's harkening back to a lot of these times. I think that's where it feels somewhat familiar and somewhat very unfamiliar in these
Mhm.
areas that we're walking into. And then I think some of it feels a little off-putting at times because we're just not as used to, like, when you think of like the 1800s Halloween costumes, it just like,
Oh,
ugh,
those are
it's so
terrifying.
creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But at the time, clearly they somehow weren't.
Yeah, that was
So
normal.
yeah, and some of that like feeling is there where like to us it's
Mhm.
very odd, but to these characters it's very normal. And it's or like we're seeing it from Wirt and Greg's perspective of like this is super not normal, but like why to these characters that we're meeting is this so normal?
Right.
So
I think too, for me, watching it and kind of just, like, my own life experiences as
yeah.
an older sibling, like, I
Mm.
saw a lot of that protectiveness that Wirt had towards Greg,
Hmm.
that I really resonated with, and just that own, like, older sibling anxiety. I was like, "Wow, this kid is reading me." Um,
Aw.
but I think too of just that, like, we've talked a little bit about media symbolizing that transition from childhood into more
Yeah.
teenness, and I think there's elements of that where
Yes.
Greg still is very much the child and imagination, and we're just kind of like, no, like we got to get back, we got
Yeah.
to do this, like very like practical thinking. But I think he kind of starts to find ways to hold on to some of his childhood, which I think we
Yeah.
all need to do. Maybe not necessarily better at, but we should all try to incorporate elements of that into our lives. And then I did want to share because my sister had this theory, um, probably about like episode 8 or 9. She's like,
Mm.
I think they're dead, and this is like them transitioning to an afterlife. And I was like, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at this point if it took a darker turn, but we are very glad that they lived at the end, so a little
Yeah, me
spoiler.
too. Yeah, there's a lot of theory like that is one of the theories similarly to another show. Is that like the entire time it was purgatory and that's what all
Mhm.
of the characters are in that it's purgatory. I think I don't think the creator has specifically said anything. He has said that purgatory is a theory that people have, but he also has other theories. And I'm not sure if that's just something where he doesn't want to give what the actual answer is, or if he has the answer, but or if he just doesn't know what the answer is and it's just kind of that like is this real, is this not type of a feeling of
Yep.
it. I have heard a quote and I'm gonna butcher it, but it like the core of it is he was talking about with masks and costumes and things like that, especially in that time period that you're talking about of like that teenage time period where like
Mhm.
you're kind of having a mask on, other people are kind of having a mask on, you're just trying to like figure out what it means to be this age. And like when he likes Sarah, but then he thinks that Sarah likes this other person. And then it turns out, no, Sarah does like him, and the courage and what does that look like? And all of those
Yeah.
transitions that some of it is just that teenage years of things, but given in a cartoon form. So it's really, I think, masterfully done. Now, again, there are some really dark episodes that I don't love, but like there's also really thoughtful elements in it. So
Absolutely.
I don't think they wasted any time, especially because, like you said, like they are very short episodes. I think the entire runtime of all 10 is under 2 hours.
Yeah, it's like I was kind of like, why didn't they just make it a movie? Because it's like the same runtime as that. But I do think breaking it up in that
Yeah.
way really makes you sit with the story a little bit more. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, now we can just binge it, so you don't get that. But when it's broken up in the release, like you're able to think about that a little bit more, and just how we don't really get that a lot of time with
Yeah.
TV or media. Like we just consume everything so quickly. But the other thing that I was going to say when you were talking about how the creator hasn't really weighed in on which theory is correct, I love when creators don't say that. And that way, like
Mhm.
everyone can kind of make it what it means to them. And I think that's way more meaningful when people are able to, with their own life perspectives and experiences, are able to form their own meaning in something. And I just think that's really beautiful that we can all, not to sound cheesy, but like we can all have our lives and take away different pieces that are personal to us and create these theories and these ideas about it, even if it's something that the creator had never even thought of. But
Yeah.
if it's resonating with you in that way, I think that's like a mark of like good art, is where people
Yeah.
can interpret it in their own way.
Yeah. It's very interesting too because going back to like very specific decisions that they decide to make or not make for a while, they were kind of planning on having the younger brother get out, but not the older brother. And then they were like,
Oh
nope,
yeah.
but they both need to get out.
That would have been too sad.
Yeah, and then when they first hop over the wall, there's a train that's kind of coming at them, which kind of like lends them to falling down the hill. But for a while, the plan was to have them be on the train and like, what's the train doing? Do they hop off the train? What does that look like? And it's just like the creative process of like, okay, what works and doesn't work for this story? Like, what is actually giving the direction, but while also having it be, I guess, I try to say these words. I'm like, is it ambiguity and ambiguous enough to where
Hmm.
you can kind of glean those different aspects of it? So it's more layered than I would have thought first watching it. At first, you're just like, okay, this is confusing. I don't get it, but
Yeah.
it makes a little bit more sense now for sure. And there's other aspects of it that pull from classic architecture, classic stories, some folklore type things, classic Americana, different music eras of things. So it's kind of a nice culmination. But I think kind of thinking about it in almost that Wonderland type feel of it just kind
Hmm.
of gives the vibes of, okay, are these kids remembering this for real or are they just kind of like making it up?
Right.
So those are all my thoughts.
So good. And just to like reiterate that, like I just think that is again a mark of like good art, is
Yeah.
that, not to be repetitive, but just like you could really glean anything from it. And one of those things of where you can also glean something different at different parts in your life, like
Yeah.
not to bring everything back to Gilmore Girls, but I think that is something that people can resonate with at different stages in their life because of the
Yeah.
generations represented. And I think that's something with Over the Garden Wall, is where you could watch it maybe as a little bit over as an older kid, because it does get a little creepy, and still find that, oh, like you maybe identify more with Greg, and then as you get older maybe you identify more as Wirt, and then as an adult you kind of relate to this, oh, growing up and saying goodbye to childhood, but still wanting to hold on to that.
Yeah.
You could kind of come back to it in different stages of your life.
Yeah, I think that's like that familiar, unfamiliar combo of things. Whereas a lot of it will feel familiar because it is representing those things. Just like with Gilmore Girls, it is representing just like a small town, 3 generation woman connection. And what does that look
Hmm.
like? And the different layers of that and different times in life of that. And I think that's again, like that is also what makes it rewatchable
Yeah,
too.
absolutely.
So fun. Okay,
You
Larissa,
did it.
you did it. What made your life this week 2% cozier?
I'm very excited to talk about mine. Joy already knows what it is because I was texting her about it last night.
It looks so good.
But I hearkened back to an older episode and watched an old case file,
Oh,
The Parent Trap.
classic.
And I saw someone doing this like in a reel, and immediately was like, I have to do this myself. But we made chili because, you know, Chessie always makes
Yum.
it for Nick. And we had red wine that we actually had. We have a few bottles from a Napa trip we took a few years ago. So we actually had like Napa
Perfect.
wine. And then for dessert, we did the Oreos and peanut butter. So it was just kind of
Cute.
like a fun little immersive experience. And I've talked quite a bit about our fall movie list. And obviously, Parent Trap exclusively takes place in the summer, but we made the vibes fall. And I think there could be quote unquote fall elements because
Yeah.
if you go to summer camp and it's in Maine, which just kind of
Yeah.
feels eternally fall to me, and the, you know, just the Nancy Meyers aesthetic can also read very fall. So we were like, this in our head today is a fall movie.
Cute. Yeah, I love that movie. I feel like, again, kind of talking about different media and different time periods, I feel like you can kind of make it also in different time periods. Because, like, my case file this week came out in, I believe, November, but like it's clearly a fall
Yeah,
vibes thing. But then clearly it was watched in November. So I feel like you can kind of pull things into different seasons depending on your feels and vibes of it.
absolutely.
So I think it could work
What was your
for sure.
2%?
Mine also actually had to do with food. I didn't read yours before. We made a stew, and it was the first one that we've made of the season. And or is it stew? This is where I get confused. There's like the stew, and then there's like something else. Basically, we like braised whatever that thing is that, and then there was potatoes, carrots,
That sounds like a stew to
celery.
me.
Okay, that's what I thought. So that's like there's another word that I can't think of, but like that gets confused. And then so I have not made this, but I do want to get your thoughts on this because I've been looking this up a lot,
Mhm.
which is okay. It's gonna sound gross at the beginning, but it's a bone broth hot chocolate? Question
Hmm.
mark? I don't know because I don't know. I don't want it to taste like bone broth,
Yeah,
but I've seen different recipes, so I have one that I pulled up that I'm curious to see what your thoughts are. So it's a half cup of bone broth, a fourth a cup of, and this is my thing. They said coconut milk. I'm not the biggest coconut milk lover.
me
They
neither.
also wrote heavy cream and then cocoa powder, or is it cacao powder? What's the
Yeah.
okay?
Well,
What's
there's
the
I mean,
difference?
there's a I think cacao is where like that's where chocolate comes from. So I think like a
Ah,
cacao powder, that's a tongue twister.
that is hard.
Um I want to say that that's like less sweet and probably like less
Mm,
rich, whereas like a cocoa powder and is that one's
mm.
definitely probably more processed.
Okay, okay. Yeah, because they also have like a little bit of maple syrup in it. So I think really what it is I want things that are also like good for my body, but I also want hot chocolate.
Yeah.
So I've heard that it doesn't really taste like, because like a lot of people in their hot chocolates will just use water, which I would prefer to use milk.
I
Not a
get
big
my this is controversial
yeah.
in our household. My sister is
Oh,
the water and hot chocolate, and I give her crap for it all the time because I'm like,
yeah, I don't like it.
ew. And she's like, I mean, to her, she's like, it tastes the same. I'm like, mm-mm. With the
No.
milk, it's so much creamier.
Yeah,
But then she's
agreed.
like, yeah, but then if I use water, then we don't run out of the milk faster and you can have it. And so I'm like, okay, you do have a point there.
I know, so that's where, like, I'm, like, curious about it because I feel like I've also gotten some hot, chocolate mixes that just end up, like, hurting my stomach, like, I don't know what's in them,
Mm,
and so I'm curious if I kinda, like, DIY
make your
it,
own. Yeah.
if it would, like, taste so that's, like, my, like, aside to it because we didn't make that yet because the first recipe I saw only said, the coconut milk, and I don't have coconut milk, and I was like, "Er," but I'm wondering if I do the heavy cream, if that somehow balances out. I don't know. If any of our cozy detectives had tried that, let me know.
I've
I'm sure
never
by the
heard of
time
that before.
right?
I think I was either in college or just out of college because
Mhm.
that was at the rise of Pinterest when that was first becoming a
Yeah.
thing. And I did try it where you put an avocado in,
Oh.
not hot chocolate, but like a chocolate smoothie to make it like quote unquote
Mm.
healthier and, but still creamy. And like you couldn't fully taste it, but I think it was just like the placebo effect of knowing there was an avocado. I was like, no, I can taste
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Um, and it's interesting too that they have coconut milk and heavy cream because
It
usually
was
if
a
you're
or.
oh, it was a substitute. I was like, that's weird
Yeah.
to put both because like coconut milk
Yeah.
is usually if like you're lactose intolerant or vegan. And so I
Yeah.
was like, why would you do both? But yeah, and I use coconut milk usually if I'm making maybe like a curry or like a Thai dish.
Mm.
I don't usually, I never drink it.
I haven't either.
Um,
I actually have a very selfish question to ask right now. So I have gotten coconut milk. I think it's in a can.
mhm.
Okay. Is it supposed to be separated? Am I supposed to be shaking it or something before? I'm just
I
confused by it. That's why I've never really used it well.
yeah, I've used the can because I do like the cream that it forms on top.
Yeah. Do I
I
just
think
use that?
yeah, no, I'll if I'm like needing a whole can, I'll just dump the whole thing because eventually it like will all mix together.
Okay.
I think technically you're probably supposed to like stir it back so it all becomes like uniform.
Oh,
But I'm like,
okay.
if I'm putting it into a sauce, I'm like, it's all gonna get blended up or mixed up regardless. But sometimes I've used it before as like a garnish almost, like instead of like a Greek yogurt or a
Oh.
sour cream, I'll just put like a dollop of that like coconut cream on there. Um, but yeah, I will say like coconut can be a pretty strong flavor. So that's why I usually only use for like the actual like, coconut milk, I'll only use it in some sort of like savory dish because the
Yeah.
spices are a lot more flavorful and it kind of pulls away from that like coconutty taste. And I don't mind it sometimes in more desserts like a cookie or like a Mars. Is it Mars? No, Mounds, I think is the one with.
Oh, yeah, 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 with the coconut flakes?
hmm So I don't mind it sometimes with that, but I have to be in the mood for it. Although my favorite Girl
Yeah.
Scout cookie is a Samoan that has coconut in it.
So good. So, so good.
But I'm
Yeah.
very curious. That
I
one doesn't
know.
doesn't like perplex me too much because you can make coconut pretty sweet. It's the bone broth and hot chocolate that I'm just like, I
Yeah.
don't trust that personally.
Yeah, I think I might try it just because it's
Yeah, I'm
supposed to
just
be better
wanting
for
to
your
know.
gut, but if it tastes nasty, it will be unfortunately not replicated again.
Yeah,
But
I want you to try just so you can report back because I'm very curious about this now because I've never heard of this because yeah, it's just either water or some sort of like milk
right?
cream
Yeah, it got offered to me
situation.
on Instagram and I went, "Oh, they say it's gut healthy." And then I was like, "Oh, what's this recipe?" So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm very perplexed. And then are you, like, gonna make your own bone broth for it?
I don't know. Ever since you've been talking about the one, I don't even remember which episode at this point, but where you put the scraps in the bowl and that's how
Uh-huh.
you make the veggie broth. I'm like, ooh, well, like it'd be really good because if it's getting into that colder weather, once like the weather snaps or whatever that's called, people get
Yeah.
sick. And I'm like, I don't want to get sick. And I've heard that like broth are supposed to like really help with that. So I don't know. We'll see. Joy be doing too much sometimes anyway. So maybe I'll just I also
Yeah.
just like totally bought a whole box of the it was like the organic, there's like some new organic one at Trader Joe's and I was like,
Mm.
not bone broth but just hot chocolate.
Hot
So
chocolate.
we'll see.
Mhm.
But what are our other 2% cozies this week?
Yes, from our cozy detectives.
Yes.
I have a few more fun fall themed ones.
Yay.
So, Book Dragon underscore reads submitted that they were wrapping up in a cozy blanket and reading, which always here for those vibes. Very
Yep.
cozy, very 2%. Gabby Paredes, I think that's how you say that, 213, said that they pulled out their leggings and put away the jean shorts.
Ooh,
So
yep. The
love getting
swap.
to swap those out. We're still in shorts weather here, sadly. But maybe by the time, fingers crossed, so this episode comes out, we will have leggings weather. But at this point, I'm doubtful we're ever gonna get fall.
We'll get there.
And then Creative Pursuit Studio said that they were planning their autumn garden, which I think sounds really fun.
Love.
So I'm excited to hear more about that. You'll have to keep us updated with
Yeah.
that.
Send us a photo.
Yeah, for sure.
And a reminder that you or other cozy detectives, whether that is somebody that is already submitted one or has yet to submit a 2% cozy, you can do that two ways. So one is via our Gmail, which is blanketfortfiles at Gmail. And then two is our Instagram, which is blanketfortfilespod.
Yes.
And also send your tips for your town in. So if you have
Tips
cozy
through
tips
town.
for your town, send them to us. at
Yes.
those two ways. You can find us also on Instagram at Blanket Fort Files Pod. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. We'd appreciate your feedback, so leave us a review. It really does help. And follow us on your platforms, including YouTube. Follow us there as well. Join us next week in the Blanket Fort, where we'll discuss the coziness of some of our, I guess, favorite / childhood PBS shows.
Yeah, I'm so excited for all the nostalgia that week.
I know, the throwbacks.